Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
This is being brought to you by the good graces of V Tait Educational Productions, Zoom. Hopefully it'll be on Manhattan Neighborhood Network the following Monday, which would be, I believe, the holiday, President's Day, with the 19th, because we're taping it on Tuesday the 13th. Today is the 13th, right, guys? And it's Tuesday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. And there's not much love in the air from what I can see, what's going on politically, globally, and locally. But the United States Senate, though, actually managed to do something of note. And they actually passed the big, national security blockbuster bill, something like $95 billion worth of aid. Who wants to break down where that aid's going?
Well, it's 60 billion is scheduled to go to support Ukraine in its war against Russia. 14 billion is scheduled to go to Israel and its war on Hamas and Palestine. 9 billion is supposed to go for refugee relief in Gaza, and 5 billion is supposed to help Taiwan in its defense against China incursions in the Pacific.
All right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the bill that got torpedoed, the version that the House had that was supposed to have Homeland Security dollars as part of the National Security Bill, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so because it didn't have the Homeland Security Bill, the House Speaker is talking about it being dead on arrival, but because there were also some caveats in it, some Democrats were not happy, Alan.
Well, one of the key opponents is Bernie Sanders, who's technically an independent. But Bernie voted against the bill, and this is what he said in his statement. Israel has the right to defend itself against Hamas terrorism, but does not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people. And then he just laid out the casualties: 27,000 Palestinians killed, 67,000 wounded. 2/3 of the casualties are women and children. 1.7 million people have been driven out of their homes. 70% of the housing units have been destroyed. And he says hundreds of thousands of people are literally starving to death. And at the same time, the United States has refused to fund the United Nations Relief Agency, which is the primary provider of relief aid. And it's important to note that Bernie Sanders identifies as Jewish, but he finds the money going to support Netanyahu's right-wing government completely unacceptable.
Yeah. The interesting thing about it is the fact that the bill specifically said they were not going to send any money to that UN relief agency because of the allegations, the charges made by the Israeli Defense Forces or whomever, which I've since read an article that said they got information after torturing some Hamas prisoners, but supposedly 12 of these UN relief workers were part of the October 7th attack, and the charges were made. And so immediately most Western media and most Western governments just basically took it at face value. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the agency fired 12 people that they suspected may have been involved in stuff they shouldn't have been involved in, but they launched an investigation. And they're not the only people doing the investigation about was there really any complicity of being involved in the October 7th attack. That investigation is still ongoing from what I have read. So there's no definitive answer about whether or not that's actually true. It may well be, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's not, but because there's been no definitive answer, the fact that the US and other individuals have said, we're not giving you people any more money. I think for me, that's kind of a rush to judgment. I believe the government of Belgium, the Belgians have said, no, we're not going to just take their word. We're going to continue to fund one organization founded in 1949 that's been providing aid to Palestinian refugees, Syria, Jordan, Gaza, West Bank, not just in Gaza. We're going to continue providing aid to that organization. So I can understand why Bernie would say what he said. Go ahead.
No, Alan, I think you were saying before we went on air that this is 11 or 12 people out of an organization with like 11,000 members, 11,000
yes, 11,
people in that
employees
in the organization. So we've decided to cut off funding to this organization based on the actions of about 12 people, and I'm definitely not defending what the 12 people might have done. If they were part of the Hamas invasion, then, personally, to hell with them. Go right ahead and prosecute them. But to defund the organization based on the action of 12 out of 11,000 does seem like a knee-jerk reaction, and it does seem like a politically expedient decision, because it sounds very good in an election year to defund an organization with members who did this. We need more thought into this, a little bit more. The charges are there. Let's go prosecute them and see if they're really guilty.
Let's go investigate the charges and see if indeed these charges, because the Israelis have leveled a number of charges in a number of other incidents that turned out to be bogus, correct?
Yeah, we've never seen the pictures of the decapitated babies.
Right, that went across the globe. Decapitated babies, and you were yet to see one smidgen of evidence, one picture, not one, but that took up the news cycle for quite a while. All right, so the
other thing is these 12 individuals are accused of involvement, but they're not accused of participation. And I think the wording is very important. Participation meant you were one of the people across the border and you were involved in these horrific crimes. Involvement means that you may have been a Hamas supporter, and you could have been a Hamas supporter before these events took place. It's reminiscent of the red baiting scare in the 1950s, where people had been members of the Communist Party in the 1930s were all of a sudden fired. But in the 1930s, it wasn't illegal to be part of the Communist Party. Now, Hamas has been branded a terrorist organization, but they hasn't been able to prove these people participated. And again, it's 12 out of 11 out of 13,000 workers.
Yeah.
It's infinitesimal. It's not even a fraction. It's a fraction of a fraction.
The interesting thing is Hamas is actually also a political party. Yeah. They actually won their elections in Gaza. I mean, they didn't spearhead, strong arm the voters. They were elected to rule in Gaza. And my understanding is they won fair and square, upright, more than a majority, more like a plurality.
Yeah, 2006.
Yeah. And so the point of the matter is the military wing of Hamas is responsible for these atrocious things. But how are you going to destroy a political party or a political entity militarily? So for Israel to say they're not going to stop until they have destroyed Hamas, well, yeah, you might be able to try to destroy the military wing of Hamas, but I don't think you're going to be able to bomb political ideas out of people. And so the reason why you're seeing, what was Bernie's figure, 27,000 people dead?
Yeah.
Because some of those 27,000 people were innocent civilians, but they were also probably part of the Hamas political party. There's no two ways about that. You cannot just say that they didn't vote to put Hamas into power, but that doesn't mean they would pick up arms and go do terroristic acts the way the military arm has been doing. So yeah, I can see why Bernie would vote, even though I'm actually glad that bill passed, because it does have what, 9 billion in humanitarian aid to help Hamas. I mean, to help Gaza, to help Palestinians in Gaza, and they need it. The question of who's going to provide that aid if you don't also give money to the organization that's been doing that across the region since 1949 is like catch-22.
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't make sense. But speaking of Alice in Wonderland, the House that said it's the bill that just got passed in the Senate is dead on arrival. Tell us a little about that, Bob, Ray, what are you guys about whether the fact that didn't they just have that bill before the House that was not voted on because who said, I don't want you to vote on this, much less because it's going to give my opponent a win? Tell me, who was that? Who said that? And why did they not take up that? Because that bill had border security in it, right?
Go for it, Bob.
Well, I mean, it obviously it was Trump, you know, the person who the Republican Party kneels down to listen to, and he didn't want this bill to go forward without the border security provisions in it, and even went off the I guess went off the rails. Well, Donald Trump goes off the rails a lot in speaking about international security in terms of NATO, in terms of the organization which basically protects Europe and the U.S. and the world against Russian aggression. And should I run that clip, Eric?
Yeah, the only thing that got more press last week and still getting press is the special counsel report about Joe Biden not being prosecutable for having the classified documents in his Delaware home and in his DC office. Was that report, because the report said opening 2 lines, no grounds for prosecution, we don't think we're going to prosecute. And then the rest of it was, yeah, but he's old and senile. and that was the giant news. But the thing that basically knocked that out of the box, not quite, was Donald Trump and his comment about NATO. Yeah, I think we should cue that clip to remind people.
Let's see
How old are you, Eric?
Clip cut.
Let's see if I can do this quickly. I think this is, whoops.
There you go.
Okay.
Audio.
Can you hear the audio? It's kind of soft.
Back it up and boost the audio.
Okay, I'm backing it up to the initial point, and I'll boost the audio as much as I can, but that's where it is. It's all the way up.
Okay.
And so just you know,
there's no audio, but again, he didn't make sense anyway.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's too bad. Let me. You know what?
Well, you know, what he's saying is that he's being a schoolyard bully, although he's not making it directly about him. He's making it about Russia and NATO. He's saying, well, you know, if you're not paying your protection dues, I don't care. Russia should. I don't care what Russia does to you. That's schoolyard bully talk.
Let me see if I can find one. I don't know. But do I have to hit share screen and make this work?
I mean, I can try to boost my personal audio and run that again if you want to give it a shot.
I don't think it's your audio.
Yeah. This is the thing. Like, one of the things that's interesting is, you know, the United States is pressuring NATO members to pay at least 2% of their gross domestic product towards NATO.
And it would be nice.
Huh?
I said that would be nice, but it's not a dues-based organization. It's a treaty. As Bob pointed out, it's a treaty. It's not a dues-based organization. And everybody needs to understand that. It's a treaty. It's a treaty, period.
Yeah.
A-
Well,
And the
what's
big
inter-
problem, and the big problem is the people who were listening to him at that rally, not one of them are going to fact check what he just said.
Of course
Not
not.
one of them.
Of
They're
course
just going to
not.
take him at his
Of course
word. He
not.
says that NATO was
That's the way
broke
the
before he
Trumpers
got there.
are.
Yeah.
MAGA is that way. They don't have to fact check anything because the king said so. So it's gospel.
Yeah, NATO was set up in
Get me
1949
started on that idiot.
in response to the Cold War, but also in response to World War II. After World War I, the United States had a big, America First movement, much like Trump's, that says we're not going to be involved in European affairs. Well, one of the problems then was that the Nazi Germany sweeps through Europe. And then when the United States does enter the war, it takes 3 years to counterattack because Germany has fortifications all over the European coast. After World War II, the United States is worried that the Soviet Union could try the same thing, could sweep through Europe and basically make it impossible to counter. So it sets up NATO, and all the countries pledge to defend each other because they don't want to happen what happened with Nazi Germany.
Mhm.
So the concern is if the United States doesn't defend Europe, the next war would be fought here rather than there. So it was done to protect the American people from the devastation of World War II.
Yeah, we know that it's basic history that kids that were taught well, American history, European history, World War II, global history, used to learn.
Yeah.
I don't think they're learning it anymore these days,
They're
unfortunately.
not learning anything these days, apparently.
Because first of all, they stopped teaching history, they stopped teaching civics, they stopped teaching. So basically, there's an illiterate group of folk who know nothing about history, international relations, treaties, North Atlantic Treaty Organization,
NATO, right?
no Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, all the stuff that was set up to try to keep aggression in check from dictators like Joseph Stalin and whomever. And the problem with Europe is the history of Europe before World War II, before World War I, is nothing but aggression for territory. Prussian Empire, Habsburg Empire, Russian Empire, you name it, it was all who's biggest, who can take whose territory. Well, at one time, they gobbled up all of Poland. I mean, they just partitioned Poland and Poland disappeared, okay? And so that is the history of Europe until the end of World War II, when the US looking back and said, we're not going to get involved in all this craziness all the time, all over again. Let's set up something. And that's how NATO was born. And because they set it up in Europe, they said, okay, let's set it up in Asia as well. They set up a Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, blah, 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 blah. And it has kept global conflicts at bay since the end of World War II. The guy who had that dictatorial quote interview with Tucker Carlson last week understands that entire psychology. And so he's trying to turn the clock back to those days. That's why he was preaching to Tucker Carlson about some 1792 treaties that he was handing to him. Carlson knows nothing about international relations or history. He's just sitting there slack-jawed, mouth open, and Putin is just running a game on him. Well, Putin decided, I don't care what these treaties and what these organizations are. I'm going to attack these people if I see fit. You notice every country he's invaded were not NATO countries, okay? They're talking about, oh yeah, well, he didn't attack when Trump was in office. He didn't attack any NATO countries when Trump was in office. And he didn't attack any NATO countries when any other president was in office, because he understands that that treaty says if you attack one, you attack all. And as a result, he's been held in check. So for Trump to say, okay, NATO, if you don't pay your bills, yeah, if Russia attacks, we're not going to come defend you. That's the quote we were trying to get to play. And he says, as a matter of fact, I'll encourage them to do whatever they feel like doing with you if you don't pay your bills. Well, yeah, right. Look, there's a quote from General Wesley Clark that I got to read because Clark puts it perfectly. Clark says, it's an appalling statement that could only come from a deranged and twisted mind. I do not say this lightly. A second Trump presidency would put the lives of every American, both in uniform and civilian, at severe risk. That was Wesley Clark's reaction to Trump's stupidly deranged statement, okay? And the Republicans in his party are not pushing back.
No.
They could care less that he's giving Putin the green light to do whatever he sees fit in Europe.
One of the countries that is deficient is Canada. Canada pays 1.38% of its GPA rather than 2%. So essentially, Trump is inviting Russia to sit on the northern border of the United States.
Hey.
I mean, if people want a simple explanation of what's going on here, go to factcheck.org. I'm not saying it just to plug them, but they do a great they're great at fact-checking statements like the one that Trump made. And they give an excellent history of what NATO is and that it's not a membership organization. And they build on what Alan was just saying and what Eric was just saying. So I would just suggest that. But yeah, he's he what else can we say about this guy? Or about Tucker Carlson and his idiotic interview with Putin, which was eviscerated by every other real journalist who had the stomach to even watch 5 minutes of it. I didn't.
Tucker Carlson is like Donald Trump. He's a lapdog for Vladimir Putin. Okay, now we said that about Trump back in 2016 when we called him an agent of the Soviet of Russia. We came out and said he was an agent on Media Watch. I remember we had a discussion. Should we say that? And we went, yeah, we can say that because all his actions point to it. And I believe Robert Mueller's investigation actually showed where he and his people were in cahoots with some elements. Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, was an agent of Putin, and that's been documented. People don't believe what I'm saying because they poo-pooed Robert Mueller's report, and Mueller didn't nail it down properly as far as I was concerned. But yeah.
And back when he was the highest rated celebrity on TV, all four of us said that Tucker Carlson was not a journalist. I mean, we took him down then. I mean, each one of us had something to say about him, and he just showed it with this interview, this crazy interview.
Oh God, this stuff is just making me sick to my stomach. But
and just to keep us on track, we have about 4 minutes left.
Yeah. Eric, maybe you should run for president because I know Bob and I and Ray, we're not old enough.
Yeah, really. Well, I'm almost there. I'm getting there.
Well, maybe I'll quote Ronald Reagan. And Joe Biden is sharper than Ronald Reagan was in similar stages of their lives, but everybody's focusing on how old Joe Biden is. They should be focusing on how deranged Donald Trump is. but anyway, no, I'm not going to run for president.
Isn't Bernie Sanders older than both of those guys?
I know Bernie is at least as old as Joe Biden. And
he's older.
Still sharp. Nobody's accusing him of being senile. I know I'm older than Joe Biden, and I know nobody's accusing me of being senile. And so I'm an octogenarian who would not cast a stone at Joe Biden because when I was 29, I was forgetting stuff. And I said to myself at 29, oh yeah, right. You walked in there, you don't remember what you went in there for. So when you're 79, don't tell yourself you're getting senile. I remember saying that to myself at 29. So my memory's still working. But to get back to wrapping this up, there's a special election in Queens right now to replace George Santos, the wacko who got elected by being the biggest phony, an even bigger phony than Donald Trump. because at least Trump had some money, even though he lied about his wealth, and was found guilty of fraud in a New York court by a New York judge, okay? Found guilty, not, accused of being guilty of fraud. Companies found guilty, also found guilty of sexual assault in a New York court and had to pay damages, 81.3 or 83.5 million in damages to the woman. We talked about it previous show, but anyway, we don't know what the outcome is going to be of that special election. That's Tom Swazi against Mazi Phillip or whoever
Phillips,
the person is.
Mazi Phillips.
Yeah, and there's a ton of money that's been spent on that particular House race because both parties know the balance of power in the House could hinge on just that one race. And so we had a nor'easter up here in New York, folk. It stopped early enough in the day so people might still be able to get out there and vote, but the weather might have an effect on the outcome of that vote.
One of the scary things is the Republican candidate has no record. She's a paper candidate that they picked because of her background and her demographic appeal. That's very scary because in the last Newsday poll, 44% of the voters were going to vote for her, despite the fact that she had no record. And it's not that she had no experience, she has no record at all. And
But they have a history of doing that.
Scary.
They voted for George Santos, who had a made-up paper record.
Hey, listen, they ran a guy named Herschel Walker for a seat. Come on.
That's very frightening that people would vote for candidates like this. Because what does it say about the American voters, American electorate?
What did I say earlier about an illiterate electorate? It's not that they're illiterate. They're just not, would you say?
Engaged.
Engaged. But Ray said apathetic the last show. The apathy, they're not engaged. They don't really want to study on who these candidates are. So the democracy, who was it? Ben Franklin, who said your democracy is
a wonderful experiment.
As the people who can keep it. I forget how many different quotes were put together in one mishmash, but I think we're about out of time.
And with that, yes.
So
last night on the Daily Show, Jon Stewart called this electile dysfunction.
Because of with that, this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait. I'm
Raymond Peterson.
Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on Media Watch on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.